Hey, welcome everybody back to another excellent episode. The episodes I look forward to with Will Leach. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour, where Will's going to blind us with science to help us connect better with our clients. Will, how are you?
I'm doing great today. It's just before the big holiday next week, and I'm looking forward to a little bit of a holiday break. So, all good things. Hey, there's that book. I've seen that book before.
So Will's the author of Marketing the Mind States, the practical guide to applying behavior design to research and marketing. And this is where we have great conversations all around the in-depth topics of how to apply mind state marketing to better connect with your clients. The clients on the other end, they're humans. They have lives, and they're in these states of mind when they're evaluating what you do. And what a wonderful way to figure out how to connect better with them, to help them feel understood, and to help them feel safe. Will, you wanted to talk about today this topic about managing to personality classifications can actually hurt you and your staff. What do you mean?
Yeah. So, for the last couple of weeks, we've talked about, since it was Halloween, we talked about alter egos, and we talked about how that we all have a hero inside of us. And it got me into thinking a lot more about that. When I was in corporate America, personality tests were important. And if you go on Facebook and LinkedIn, all these different things right now, personality tests are really engaging. They're fun for people to take. They can tell you a lot about your personality and who you are and some of the things that, make you who you are. The problem with personality tests is that you should not manage to personality tests. And I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that because year-end reviews are happening now for a lot of people. And I want anybody out there who is thinking about using one of these personality tests to review one of their employees, or you're using these things to manage your employee's personality. I'm going to tell you why I don't think that's the right thing for you to do, or certainly not the only thing that you should do.
So when you say manage, you mean as far as the manager taking these insights and trying to apply them to better manage their employees?
That's right. So let me give you an example of what happened to me. So I was over at PepsiCo, and we wanted to, of course, build leadership and train each other to work better together. And we took a DISC profile. There's a whole bunch of these different companies that come in and they have you take a survey of some length, and then they do an assessment, and then they come in and they train you on how different personality types should engage with each other. And from the personality profile that this DISC assessment gave me, it categorized me as a deep thinker, which is actually not that different than what I really am. I mean, different personalities tests tell me I'm a deep thinker. I'm thoughtful, and I'm driven, and you know me, driven by competence as my motivation, meaning I seek skills. I'm constantly trying to learn new things. I'm trying to get as much depth in a particular field of knowledge because I believe that knowledge is a core requirement to be successful. It's just something I grew up on. So this personality classifier categorized me as a color. There's these color things, right? I'm sure there's others out there, but I was a blue. And so we all talked about this blue and how we could communicate better with blue. Well, then about 6 months later, an opportunity came up to drive innovation with a totally different group. And I was being sought after a bit. Well, would I be interested in this position? But at the time, the people remembered I was blue. They said, yeah, but is Will really aggressive enough? Hey, Sakita, is Will really the type of person that is going to do well in this role because he's a blue? We need somebody who's aggressive. We need somebody who's a red, and a red will take chances and seize opportunities. And so that was actually going to limit me from this project, from this group. And at the time, I had a manager who was smart enough who said, no, that's Will. Yeah, he's naturally like that, but I think he could step up to the challenge. And that if she wasn't there in this meeting, I wouldn't have taken on this role. And this role was actually launching a series of new brands for Frito-Lay in an incubator. And in that incubator, I learned about behavioral sciences. And 10 years later, I'm here today talking to you as a best-selling author and as a world's leading expert in this field. And it came out of this role. And I loved how my manager had the foresight to not position me and package me into one little identity, based upon some kind of a personality profile. And you had it up there, Steve. They are notoriously inaccurate. Personality tests, guys, are fun. They give you insights into yourself, but there's a couple of things you should know about them. The first thing is that there is very little scientific evidence that tells you that a personality profile will actually dictate or predict a future behavior. Like Myers-Briggs, that's been out there for decades. Myers-Briggs has been studied so many times, and there's no evidence, none at the academic space anyways, that suggests that is predictive of who you are or what kind of behavior you're going to take. So if you're going to be classifying somebody as a personality, then certainly don't use something that can't predict how they'll perform in a job. Second thing that happens with personality profiles is that they're not consistent 75% of the time. So if you take a Myers-Briggs and if you wait a couple of weeks and take it again, 75% of the time, you won't be in the same profile. So that just tells you right off the bat that they're kind of measuring how you are in that moment, how you're feeling in that moment, just like a mind state, but they're not really predicting who you are. And you know this, Steve, we all change over time. Like I am not the same person I was when I was 25. And I was different at 35 and different at 45. So we evolve. People and experiences change us, and they change our personalities. And so that's another reason why personality profiles should not dictate somebody's career. And then the last thing I would say, and you know this from the book, is that we are influenced by context, like how I'm feeling in this moment, the room I'm in, who I'm with. There are social norms. There are times where I'm a little bit down maybe, or sometimes I'm elevated, and that dictates my personality. And if we don't take those things into consideration, then you're just going to pigeonhole people into a role that otherwise limits their potential. And that's what I'm trying to avoid with managing to these personality profiles.
So just right out of the box, you're saying that you can be in a state of mind when you take this test, but then you can be in a different state of mind when you're actually performing a role or actually going about your responsibilities in your job.
That's absolutely right. And I wouldn't say you could be, you are. I know you are. We all know we are, right? And what's so funny about personality tests, anybody with any insight, when you're applying for a job, and if your company asks you to take one of these tests, we're all smart enough to realize what they're trying to do. So what do? You change your answers based upon what you believe that job requires or what you believe that job or that manager wants. So the classic one are introverts versus extroverts, and that is a definite personality classification. Every introvert on the planet understands that nobody wants an introvert in their company. It's always you want an extrovert. You want somebody who can build relationships. So every introvert has been conditioned to always lie on these personality profiles. I'm an introvert. And I know I'm smart enough to realize that if I keep saying that I want to be by myself, that I'm not going to be a team player and I may lose a job. So I'm not going to answer honestly anyways. And evidence shows that people do answer those questions dishonestly because they're smart enough, especially in a corporate job. They understand what their bosses are looking for.
So what do you mean don't take into consideration people's roles to succeed?
Yeah. So this goes back to this idea that we all have roles. Steve, we've talked at it from a personal level, right? I'm a father. I'm also a business owner. I'm a husband. And so I'm an entrepreneur. So I have these roles in life. And because in different roles, I play a different part. Like I act differently and I have different attitudes and beliefs as it comes to raising my son than I will with growing a company or scaling a company. So that's just human nature. We have different roles. Well, the same thing happens to your job. You have different roles that you have in your job. Sometimes it's about a team. You're a team builder, and that's your role on a team. And your job is really to bring teams together and find commonality. Other times, you're the hard charger. You're the person. Your role on a team is to push a project through. So we used to have these teams that we used to work with at PepsiCo, where you had different people from different organizations, and then we had team leads who would drive an initiative forward. Well, that person needs to be very achievement-minded focused, overcoming barriers constantly, because in a big organization, we have tons of barriers we have to overcome. So you have to be that leader. Now, that doesn't mean I'm an achiever and I have that personality all the time, but I understood in that role, I had to get to the finish line or it would cost my entire team success. So what I want us to think about is roles, because roles are those set expectations in which people are supposed to behave in different situations. And we modify our personalities, we modify our strengths and pull back on our weaknesses depending on the role you have for that team. So remember, let me tell you about high school. I don't know if you've had this issue. I love talking about you. I love talking to you about the past, and I would like to see if you had the same experiences. So in high school, I had a set group of friends. You kind of find a clique.
Uh-huh.
In that clique, I was a little bit shy, and I was also kind of the guy that remember. Oh God, this is going to date us. Remember Potsy from Happy Days? Potsy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I was Potsy basically in my group, right? I'm not proud of it, but that because we had this guy who ended up playing Division I baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the jock, and we had a guy who was really the funny guy. And then we had this guy we called Diablo, which obviously Diablo's a guy that I don't even know if he's in prison right now, right? But in our clique, just like in a tribe, we're trying to find our role. We're trying to find our area where we can be unique. So I was Potsy. Now, take that same role and think of yourself that role now. That changed when I went in the military. In the military, I had to talk because I had a different group of people. So I had to fill in a different role. And so what I mean to make sure that we understand that different situations are people around us. We're always trying to figure out where we stand in the group. That's why raising a teenager is so hard today, guys. My son is 11 now. Gosh, can't believe it. He's 11. And sometimes he's trying to be the funny guy, and he can't be the jock because that group is already taken care of. He's the computer program. I know he's exploring because he wants to fit in. And how do you fit in? You create a unique proposition to enter into that group that's unique, but still feels like it should be a part of that group. So my point on that is roles are you're supposed to have different roles in different situations. And if you're not managing to those roles, you're limiting the potential of your staff.
So if personality tests, they give you a little bit of insight, but you don't know what to take serious and what to dismiss. But yet we still need to manage the people's natural motivations and what that role. What are some tips to help us be a little bit more natural about this? Yeah.
So I think there are two things you should know about your employees. The first one is we do have personalities, right? I'm not suggesting we don't have personalities. They're just not consistent. But I'm naturally a little bit introverted. And like I told you, I am motivated in many instances by competence. And in my book, competence is about greater skill. Mm-hmm. So I constantly read in depth to try to be very skilled on something. It's my natural desires in a lot of different things. So first off, you should know the natural motivation of your employees as best you can. So there are 9 in the book. Are they driven by achievement, a sense of belonging? Maybe it's driven by esteem. So they love the respect from others. There's empowerment, which is desire for control. So there's 9 in our book. You should understand 1 or 2 that seem to best fit with that person overall across their entire life. Some of it's just love. Some people are just giving people, and that would be nurturance. So that's important. But the second thing you should do is you owe it to your employees to look at those same 9 motivations. 9 motivations. Those same 9. Yeah, that's right. Those same 9. And think about the role that you need to be successful for this job that they have. And that job, I think you should be doing this work every 18 months, right? Because roles change, the company changes, cultures change, et cetera, in the company. So every 18 months, you should be looking at your employee's job, function, and their role on a team and say, well, in this role, is belonging important? Or bringing a team together? Or is it really very focused type of mindset, right? So which may be more achievement. Let me give you an example of how this worked for me. So I was on a team a couple of years ago where I was brought in. I was brought in on a company. It was PepsiCo. I was brought in because, and I wasn't told this during my interview, but I was brought in because my boss wanted me to create a relationship between Frito-Lay, which is a division of PepsiCo, and another division of PepsiCo. They end up having a building maybe 2 miles away, but they never talked. Never talked. So we wanted to build this relationship. So my manager hired me because I came from the military, and she said, I want to get this done, so I'm going to hire this former military guy. Now, she didn't know this about me, but I'm driven by competence, right? I believe that the best way to find skill or find success is through knowledge. So I came in and I was told, hey, you got to go build a relationship with this team. So I came in saying, here's all the reasons why. It took me a couple of weeks to understand my role, but I went to the other team at PepsiCo and said, here's all the tools and resources we can help each other out so we can become smarter in our jobs. And it fell flat. Now I'm driven by that. I'm driven by like, well, certainly you want more knowledge because we can get to a better place. Like, this is great. I'm going to share with you this knowledge. You're going to share with me knowledge, and we're both going to succeed. What happened was 2 years before, there was another leader in this role and in both roles. And there was a really bad relationship where the people at PepsiCo felt marginalized. They said the people at Frito-Lay are jerks. Like, they don't invite us to their meetings. They take ownership of things that they didn't give us credit for when we did the work. So really that role what we needed to do was try to create a tribe. Belonging is the motivation in the book. Mm-hmm. And so what I realized very quickly is that they didn't want competence from me. They wanted somebody to say, we're all in this together, and to start coming to me. And so here's literally what I did. And I won a pretty big award that first year I was there, or I had a high rating. I didn't win an award. I had a high rating because I ended up asking if I could sit in this building 2 miles away and sit with the people at PepsiCo 2 days a week. Because to them, and then they were like, well, yeah, we have an open cube. I'm like, I'll sit with you. Let me just sit. I just did my same job. But the fact that I chose to take my role and go over there for 2 days a week had nothing to do with my personal competence desires. I understood that by me sitting with them, we were forming a tribe. Mm-hmm. It was important for you to understand those dynamics as an employer and as a manager and helping them succeed. If it's something as simple as go do your job in a cube that's only 2 miles away, to go do that, because based upon that, about 6 months later, they gave us access to a new technology they've been developing. And I was able to use that technology at Frito-Lay to go and advance shopper insights dramatically. And it had no expense from our company at all, but they were using it over there. And they never would have let us know if I wasn't a part of that tribe. So that's why you have to know your core motivation the core motivation of your employee. For me, it was competence, and the role, which is belonging. Now bring those things together and they can be very, very successful in that role and hopefully do great things for your company.
So what do you mean by don't classify employees only into personality clusters? Right.
Don't fall into the trap of Myers-Briggs and say, oh, he's I don't even know what they are, JKLM or whatever. Like, because here's what could have happened. If my boss only looked at me through the lens of a blue type of employee, I would have missed out on this opportunity to be an incubator where we needed a hard charging, fast risk taker. Because when you're going to launch a brand new brand, there are so many things that get in the way. Politically get in the way, financially in the way, operationally get in the way. And you have to have the ability to adjust, to be flexible, to constantly push through barriers. And if I was classified as a blue, which in this meeting, apparently I was discussed for this role, and people said, but he's a blue. We don't think he's right for this role. And it was the most successful project in the role I'd ever had at PepsiCo. And I was there for 8 years, and it was a 1.5 year role. So don't classify people in personality clusters. Understand they have a personality, but just don't place them into only that bucket. They're bigger than that.
In my past, I was always pushed or pigeonholed into a sales role. But until I started this agency, I didn't realize I was really good at all these other things that being an entrepreneur requires. I would have never known had I not been able to explore or experience those things.
Yep.
So when you say identify 2 core mind states for your employee success, these motivations or...
That's right. I think it's more on the motivation side, to be honest with you, and understand those. And then if you can identify those, whether it's competence, from the personal level, belonging in the role or whatever, write those down and then go into the back, the appendix of the book. And in the appendix of the book, you have these profiles, and those profiles actually are pretty good at understanding the psychology of the person, who they naturally are, and the psychology that's needed to be successful in that role. So take both, look at those, and start seeing where there's bridges. So if you identify those core motivations, look to see where there's commonality and coach your employee to really express themselves in that way. And if you do that well, they should be naturally more inclined to do better in that role.
Oftentimes when I interview for folks for our team, I'm not looking for someone to fit a role. What I'm looking for is like a good team member that we can start to discern what their unique strengths are and start to position them in the areas that they really excel in a natural way.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's just doesn't happen very often because there's so much money in the consulting space of identifying personality types and creating roles for that personality type. That most people still to this day aren't really doing that. They're hiring to fit a job description in the moment. And then they wonder why in 2 years their employees are dissatisfied or they leave ship. Well, it's because you hired somebody for a role as opposed to who they are. Are they a good fit for the culture?
So give us some examples on how to manage someone to a particular motivation.
Yeah. So I'll give you another example from my past. I was working on potato chips at the time, and I just gotten promoted, and the person who was oversight of all potato chips for the company, I was their insights partner, and so I got this promotion. I was going to go support her, and my second meeting that I was with her. So I got promoted, and my first day on the job was on a Monday and I met her on Monday. On Wednesday, she said, okay, well, I want you to tell me, what do we need to go differently in Ruffles? And I remember it took me aback because I'd only been in the role for 2 days. And like anything else, when you transition from role to the next, you still have your old job. You're still trying to onboard the person who's taking over for your job. So I'm sitting there, and I remember she saw my face because I was taken aback because I didn't remember. I'm driven by competence, and I am scared to death that if you ask me a question, in fact, I'm cautious competence. I'm trying to mitigate any risk that you could ask me a question that I'm not prepared for. And that's what she did. What are we going to go do with $1 billion brand, or a couple $100 million at that time, Ruffles? And so I kind of dodged the question. A week later, she said the same thing. Basically, we're doing a one-on-one at this point, and she said, hey, Will, what is your assessment on the Ruffles brand? Now, at this point, I've been on the job for 5 days. Okay, I don't have much of a better thing. But at this time, I said, I'm going to do an assessment. I think I'll know it pretty soon. I tried to buy time. Then I was in a meeting on the following Thursday. So I'd been in the role for less than 2 weeks. She says it in front of multiple people. At least it was a small team. And I said, damn it. That's one of 2 times in my career where I said, damn it, I'll let you know when I'm ready. That was an example of her not understanding that I am driven by competence. And for every moment she keeps asking me to drill into something when I haven't had the time to dig into it myself, that was her actually pushing me farther away from what motivates me. So because of that, it took us a solid 6 months to have a relationship. Now we love each other. Like, we're still friends. I've left the company many, many years. But in those 6 months, it was very there's a lot of conflict because I felt like she just didn't understand me. So give somebody who's driven by competence time to understand, because they're looking for new insights and discoveries, right?
That's funny. So you're telling me that Ruffles, the situation with Ruffles was in your potential. You could have sent Ruffles and made them smooth had you just
That's right.
spat out an answer.
We're going to call them smoothies. Yeah, I thought maybe we were going to do that. But nobody seemed to like that idea. I don't know. I don't get it. But, I get so much for that.
But I mean, Ruffles are such a great thing with a sandwich at a particular time because they have ridges. And here you were potentially could have impacted the future outcome of Ruffles.
That's not being prepared. By not being prepared, right? So I mean, that's just a quick example. Or let's say this. Remember a role where if you are the head of a project or your employee is the head of an initiative, of a group, that's a group of people that have to come together to get to a different point. Well, if you knew that your employee is motivated by, we call it empowerment in the book, but they desire control. Like they see the best way to reach their goal is to have control over everything. And I shouldn't say it like that because that's not that it's bad. It's just that's how they naturally approach a problem, is give me greater control. Well, if I know that, and I know that the best way to get to my end goal is having this team reach their successful conclusion of the project, then I'm going to coach my employees. Okay, here's what I think you need to do. Show up to the meeting room a little bit early and sit at the head of the table. Because psychologically, when you sit at the head of the table, just like we're all going to be doing for Thanksgiving next week, whoever sits at that end of the table is generally the person in control of the meal. It's going to be mom or dad or grandma or grandpa. So sit at the head of the table. And I would coach them, have an agenda. Have an agenda that's written out. Because the worst thing, and you guys know, right? When you're in a meeting and there's too many personalities, the cult of personality kind of comes out, and all of a sudden you lose control of your meeting because people want to talk about what's important to them. So what do? You have an agenda. You coach them to have an agenda so they can maintain control. Say, hey, let's get back to the agenda. Small little steps like that to coach them to come to a meeting with an agenda and make sure everybody understands that there's an agenda could help that person who's naturally inclined to desire control and to push, towards their goal, using control to give them more control. Or the last one I came up with was belonging, right, Steve? Like if you have somebody who's just a warm, loving spirit in the office, and that's just who they are, well, then of course you're going to coach them or you're going to coach them in a different way. When you give them a review, you're going to want to talk to them and say, well, tell me about how you're feeling, right? Tell me about how you're feeling in the role. You're going to use words like that because they want to. They're loving. They want to feel nurtured. They want to give care. So you want to give them assignments if you can to talk, to allow them to feel as if they are cared for in this role. You'd want to amplify that a little bit more, or find common goals of unity. Find ways to bring people together on that team to be somewhat more successful. So those are just kind of things that if you understand what motivates them to the core and what's important in that job, bring those together into an environment where they can succeed.
Yeah, that you're making me really consider your book at a totally different level now, because I've been thinking very marketing centric, right? Yeah. But obviously it would be applicable and make sense in understanding people and what's going on with them and why they think the way they think.
Yeah, no, it is a human behavior book that I pushed in the marketing field. But when I talk about the examples that I have, with getting Nicholas to eat vegetables or doing my first Ironman, it's a human behavior book. Mm-hmm. And so, you could easily take the same concepts and write a book selling to mind states. You could easily do managing to mind states. You could do coaching to mind states, because it's all the same thing. If you understand somebody's goals, their motivations, the way they approach their goals, and then lastly, these triggers, you are able to influence. And we just choose to do it in this book through marketing. There's lots of different interactions outside of marketing that you have with human beings. Same other thing, human experience, right? Same thing we keep talking about.
So now we've turned this into a series of books in this conversation.
Great. Is that commitment effect? Did I just commit to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You've publicly stated it now.
Dang it. I have to eat my own pudding. All right.
Right.
Yeah. But no, it's very true. It's very true.
So in a relationship, not that we're managing our spouse or our partner or whatever, but in a relationship, this would be applicable, obviously.
Of course.
Give us some of us thick-headed guys some advice here.
Yeah. So I will go with my wife, Melanie. Melanie is driven by belonging, meaning she seeks relationships that bring kind of a common tribe. She does that through Bible studies. She's done that through books that she's written herself. She's done that in her own projects in corporate America. She sees the world as a better place and motivated by bringing people together. So I am an introvert. And I don't have a lot of friends. I got friends from high school, but she has hundreds of friends. All right. There you go. I got a few out there, right? Good. So she's the type of person when she says, happy birthday on Facebook, like she gets 200 people say happy birthday. I get like 38 or something. It's fine. I'm okay with it. That's who I am too. So let me give you an example of early on in our marriage where we would get into problems. We would go to a party. And she at a party is in her element, Steve. She wants to talk to everybody. She's a social butterfly. She brings people together. She can stay at a party for 6-7 hours. Me, after about 45 minutes, I'm done. I'm done. My mind hurts. I don't want to talk about the weather. I want deeper personal connections with one person. I would go do dinner with one person for 5 hours long before I do dinner with 6 people for 5 hours. It's just too mentally taxing. So we would go to a party. And after about 45 minutes, I'm looking at my watch, and we used to have this like little signal, like, can we get out? Can we get out? Like, I want to go. And then she would get frustrated at me, right? Because of course she eventually does. Now, sometimes here's what she would do. She would know that I was getting frustrated. She would look away. She wouldn't look at me, right? Because she wants to stay. And if you got a little alcohol in her, then she would just say, can we just stay? And I would end up going to a wall by myself, or actually even leave. I would go outside. Like, you wouldn't believe how many parties I've gone to the outside in the backyard by myself.
Me too.
I need a break. So what we started doing is talking a lot more about how, if this is her natural inclination, belonging, I'm about competence and, really focusing on the person, one individual. We just made a deal and said, why don't we just take 2 cars? Let me make my appearance. I'll stay. And if I love it, I'll stay. But I am totally happy, Mel, for you to come back 4 hours later. I am totally cool with that if you let me leave in a half hour if I want to leave. And because of that, we wouldn't argue anymore. Like, we wouldn't be driving home. She's like, I wish we could have stayed. I'm like, well, I'm glad we got to leave. Or vice versa. I'm arguing. I'm like, why did you make me stay at this party? I didn't know anybody. I was talking about the weather within 10 minutes. So that's a small little thing. Not to manage, but I just manage the situation. Let me create an environment where she can be her best and be where she wants to be, and I can be my best and where I want to be. It's a simple thing to do. And then we're understood. So she understands where I'm coming from. She's not mad at me for pulling her away from a party. I'm not mad at her for keeping me at a party. I just created an environment where we can both be happy, and I'm watching TV an hour later.
So there you go. What an excellent way to think about. Not only should you buy this, it's marriaging to Mindstate, right?
Oh, God, that's another one. You said that one, not me. That's your book.
So we get caught up in the moment when we're working with someone, and we're paying attention to the conversation. What are some good ways to kind of remind us to back out and pay attention to what the mind states are going on, or to look at those?
That's a great question. And I think we all fall victim to this. Hey, was that great? I think we all fall victim to this, is that you've heard me say this, 35,000 decisions you're making in any given day, and you're reacting most of the time. You're non-consciously going through life. I mean, because you can't get through the day. What it takes is a deliberate focus. Like you said, if I'm going to have a meeting with an employee, I'm going to sit down, and before I have a meeting, especially if it's a weekly review, and just take the minute it takes to remind myself of who this person is and their goals. Like, what are their goals for their career? And how does that fit? How does my role help them get closer to their idealized self, their hero within, the perfect career that they will look back on 30 years from now and say, I remember Will, and that guy, he helped me get to the next level. Just like I remember my managers, the good ones that helped me get to the next level. So you got to be deliberate. If that means putting something on your calendar to say 30 minutes a week, I'm going to review my employees, just do that. And what will happen is it'll become natural. You have intuition, you build associations, just like you do with brands, you build associations with people. And if you keep reading about this person's, kind of profile in the book, right? If you read a little bit more about the profile, you are much better able to create an association. So you know the person intuitively who they are. It just takes deliberate practice.
All right. Well, this is excellent. What are some other points that maybe we need to consider when, how can we use this in the hiring process? Obviously we don't know the person very well, but what are some tells?
Yeah. I loved what you just said is, you got to understand, just like anything else, you have a culture in your company. I have a culture in my company. There are cultures within companies, and even within a company, by department, frankly. There just are. So one is, it's important to understand those. If you're a boss or a manager, it's hard for you because you're kind of disconnected oftentimes from the coffee talk or the lunches that happen when you're not there. But as best possible, interact with your employees at the smallest level. Have one-on-one lunches. I mean, we used to do one-on-one lunches with employees where it was supposed to be just you and I, and we're going to do nothing but talk about life. And it sounds corny and it sounds a little bit weird, but just knowing somebody at that level is important, really important. So once you understand the culture and what's important to the people in that department, then you should be thinking about that when you bring in people as best possible. So if you have a culture of team building, then of course you are going to want to talk to people who you bring in to talk to you about examples of they've been on a team, they've successfully overcome challenges to a team, how they built teams. All that stuff's important. My point would be, don't only judge them on that, because if I don't have an example, because I never had the opportunity to be on a team, that should not be enough for you to disqualify me. What I should now do is, if they don't have a good example, then talk to them, give them scenarios if you can in the interview, to give them a scenario where they could show you how they would approach that to build a team. So knowing the culture of your company, of the specific department that you're going to hire somebody in, knowing the mind state that would most be critical in that role. And then honestly, the best question you can ask, and it is the end of chapter 3 in the book, is what's important to you and why. That if you can get people to tell you their goals, what's important and why, those aspirational higher order goals, sit down. I mean, that is almost word for word, Steve. You want to try to capture what's in their head and keep asking them why. And when you figure out that, they, for whatever reason, is their career, they think that their goal is to become successful. Why? It's to make a meaningful difference in my community. If that was the why, that is a totally different outlook you now have to provide, or a different outlook of this person. And the environment that will help them get the most out of their career is help them do something in the community or whatever that goal is for their career. So ask them that question. What's important to you in a job and why? Do that a couple times and hire to your ability to satisfy that in their life. If you can't provide that, you're not doing them a service by hiring them, frankly.
That's excellent. I found that the more I can get them to ask questions instead of me ask questions and them worry about what's the right answer, if I can get them to go, look, why don't you spend about 20 minutes and ask me what you want to know?
Yeah. I
start to get a really good idea of how they think, how in depth they think about stuff.
Now that's I don't think I've ever heard anybody. So rather than you interviewing them, give them a chance to interview you, and you're getting a lot more out of the questions that they ask.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's a great thing. I may try that.
Because if they start off, well, okay, what are the benefits? Well, all right. So we've really cut to the chase right there. It's like, but if you start asking me really insightful questions, or things that reveal that you're very interested, you get so much more out of that. You get a better feel for people.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a really neat tool you should put into your toolkit.
So let's talk about your workshop. When's the next one coming up?
We are taking a break in December because we are revising and revamping our workshops, based a little bit by our comment about Texas A&M University. So we're actually providing a certificate course over at Texas A&M University in the Center of Human Behavior, or the Human Behavior Lab is what they really call themselves. And we're going to be doing a certification. Because of that certification program, starting in January, we have a brand new course that's coming out. It's called the Master Class. And it's going to be a video-based course that you can take on your own, on your time. And what that'll do is, if you go through the video course, you can actually go into our master program, where it's a one-day workshop. That one-day workshop is happening in mid-January. More details to come on that soon, Steve, but it's in December. We're going to revamp everything so we can fit now Texas A&M University and what we're doing over there, plus what we're doing on our master class. But ultimately, I want us all to gather in mid-January, and we're going to do a one-day master class, master program to make you Mindstate certified.
to start off 2021 all souped up with the Mindstate marketing mindset, huh?
That's right. Amen. We got to do things differently. We're changing. The entire marketplace for marketing is changing, and we're going to change with it.
I love it. It's a way to connect with people, help them feel understood, and help them to feel safe by realizing that we go through all these different states of mind during the day as whatever role we're playing, whether it's a husband role, whether it's a father role, whether it's a professional role. We're in these different states of mind. And that by categorizing people by some personality course or results is inherently inaccurate, because it just captured them in the moment when they were answering those questions. Makes perfect sense to me. Mm-hmm. And so personality profiles, they don't take into consideration people's roles to succeed. And roles are the set expectations in which people are supposed to behave in different situations. So we're in different states of mind in different situations. Mm-hmm. I love the conversation about, the Potsy thing, Yeah. And then you go back to your high school reunion 30 years later, and it's like feels awkward that you're expected to play that same role.
And you fall into it. I do play the same role. It's terrible. It's embarrassing, but you do. We all do it. We all do it.
That's crazy. We change and go on. And I love the marriage. That what a great compromise after 45 minutes. Two cars. I love that. That's great. All right, Will. Well, thank you. This has been excellent. We'll regroup after Thanksgiving.
We will.
And be sure to let us know what topics you're interested in. And thank you, Will, for your time on here. I'm Steve Brown, ROI Online. If you're looking to get your brand in front of people on a regular conversation like this, let me know. We can set it up. We do this for others. It's a great way to start pulling out all this expertise out of your head like we do, Will. It's a great conversation. People enjoy it. We get a lot of comments. So thanks again for another great episode of the Mindstate Marketing Hour. And we'll see you soon.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
All right. That's a wrap.